Greetings, APUSH people. It is the start of the second semester, and the United States is ready to go to battle. Got some good symbols of America here. I got a USA shirt. I got some Hulk hands. Those are my son Collins. I'm going to put those aside for a moment. There they are. And, in case of refreshment, this is not an actual Starbucks cup. It's one of those you buy that's recyclable. Because I care about the Starbucks witch, and I also care about the environment and dolphins. Dolphins are very big to me. Okay? And there it is. We're starting with a new unit here, ladies and gentlemen. Unit 6, taking care of business. The idea being that American policy during this period is largely driven by the need for economic outlets and for markets and for making sure that we always make it rain. Okay. So we're going to start at the top of this. I anticipate that the first 3 pages of this will be this first video, and then there'll be a second video that'll be Teddy Roosevelt and Taft and President Wilson as well. But the first half of it will be in this video, the second half in the other video. The test is coming up next week, so let's go. Let's go. We start out by talking about American domestic policies prior to 1896. 1896 is a big year for racial politics in America. That's the year that the Plessy versus Ferguson decision came down from the Supreme Court. Plessy versus Ferguson was a Supreme Court decision that ruled that separate but equal facilities were okay. As long as those facilities were equal, it was okay to segregate the races. That upheld a lot of discriminatory Jim Crow laws. Now, Jim Crow is not an actual person. It's a reference in a song, and Jim Crow is used to refer to any legislation in the South that attempted to create 2 distinct civilizations. You've all seen those pictures of water fountains or bathrooms or railway cars or perhaps even restaurants that are basically whites on this side and African Americans on the other side. And the reason they did that was to try and develop 2 different areas. Now, Plessy versus Ferguson as a case says that that's okay. That's bad news, because what that means is that the segregated society really gets the blessing from the Supreme Court, and that's going to be there until 1954, when the Brown versus Board of Education decision is going to be handed down, which bans segregation in public schools, and then it's going to pass on to other areas. Who was the Supreme Court justice on the 1954 case? Earl Warren, like Warren Hall. And I'm sure he would be so happy to know that his hall is remembered now for being rather impossible to get out of because of freshmen. Freshmen. Yep. All right, so what to do with the society? Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois both debated on the issue of what to do with American society as a result of its segregated ways. Now, Washington is in what a lot of people would call the accommodationist crowd. We should bear with this. African Americans should work hard. They should earn over the long term the respect and the acclaim from white society, which will come to understand, especially from an economic standpoint, that African Americans are indispensable when it comes to the American economy. And if the whole section here is about the economy, then that really is important. Now, W.E.B. Du Bois, on the other hand, one of the founding members of the NAACP, is going to say, no, we're not waiting for anything. There is nothing in the 14th Amendment that says that we should have to wait for equal protection under the law. It doesn't say you're equal as long as we say you're equal. No, it says we're equal, and therefore that equality should come now. Washington's kind of seen as being the older generation, and by the time W.E.B. Du Bois is active in the 19-teens, Washington's accommodationist voice is being harshly criticized. People are looking for a lot more movement more quickly. Huge jump as we make our way out to the western part of the United States. In the late 1880s and 1890s, agricultural conditions worsened to the point where previously social organizations, the Granges, began to look to try and make society a little more relevant for farmers. They're particularly interested in getting the United States government to defend the interests of farmers. The populist movement, as it's called, is very popular out west. It's also popular in the East as well, but you're going to find most of the western states, which are the most agricultural states, have huge populist movements. What do they care about? The major planks of their movement. Number 1, government regulation of the railroads and of banks. The goal here is to try and make railroads and banks responsible to the federal government so that individuals could get fair prices on loans and fair prices on moving their goods on railroads. The goal for the populace is to try and get a predictable way of life. If you don't know how much you're going to have to pay to move your grain every year, then you don't know if you're going to make a profit, you don't know how much to borrow. On top of that, they also want federal protection of natural resources. In this sense, they're kind of granolas. They're looking for the government to step in and say there are some pristine, beautiful parts of America that we should not trample underfoot in the interests of industry. They also wanted a graduated income tax, in other words, an income tax that you paid more as your income went up, and the big one, the one you can't forget, is free silver. The populists believe that the U.S. government should move to a policy of bimetallism, that we should print paper money based not just on our gold reserves, but also on our silver reserves as well. Now, that's a controversial policy because silver is not nearly as rare as gold. Gold, the reason everyone buys gold is because it's such a rare commodity. The idea was over time that you're not going to find a whole bunch more gold, and therefore gold would always hold its value. Silver, on the other hand, is a lot more fluctuation-based. You might find huge amounts of silver. Now, if that happened, and we based our currency on both gold and silver, there's a chance that that currency could devalue. A lot of people saw that as being a danger. The golden boy, get it, the golden boy? The golden boy of the movement. Good one. The golden boy of the movement was William Jennings Bryan. Bryan is a populist, but in 1896, the Democratic Party latches onto him and makes him their nominee as well. At the 1896 Democratic National Convention, Bryan gives a speech called the Cross of Gold speech, where he says, basically, that we are not going to allow the working man and the farmer of American society to continue to be pressured by this society that makes them into cattle, that makes them work harder and harder for the will of the wealthy. You shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You will not crucify mankind on a cross of gold. Cross of gold speech. Remember that. Flipping the page. Let's talk about American foreign policy and get the Hulk gloves out for a minute. Oh, the Hulk. Okay? American foreign policy during this period is really itching for something to hit. We're looking for something good. Okay? Somewhere in the world where we can take our American skills and prove ourselves. Up till now, we've been isolationists. Remember, George Washington said, hey, stay out of European affairs. Just sort of grow up. Go through this adolescence over time, and we've done that. And now we're ready for something bigger and better. Kind of like these gloves. They're fun. Okay? So the United States is primarily looking here for some foreign markets to sell our goods. Whether we like it or not, we don't have enough demand for all of the U.S. supply of goods. That means that we need to find more people to buy our product. Agriculture especially, I was going to say agriculture and a variety of other things, but agriculture especially needs other people to buy our goods. We produce 20% more than we can consume, even with our growing population. There are some other reasons why America is going to move into imperial policies, and here they are. Alfred Mann. Mann says that America should build this huge navy, that we should have an empire, but if we're going to have one, you have to take your lead from the Greeks, and from the Romans, and from the British, and you have to understand that power is built on the sea. And if America is going to have an empire, obviously it's going to have to be somewhere across these oceans. Better build a big navy first. John Fiske is known for what's called Anglo-Saxonism, the idea that American values and American culture was at the absolute height of what human beings could achieve. This is kind of waspish, white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism, that our combination of politics and economics and religion and society is as perfect as it's ever been, that nobody has ever done it better, and that the world has the right, the opportunity to get these things from us. They should be so lucky. The last one is Frederick Jackson Turner's Frontier Thesis. Turner proposes that America is out of frontier. In the 1890 census, the amount of Americans divided by the amount of land we had revealed that by technical mathematical gestures, we didn't have a frontier anymore. And Turner worried that if we didn't have a frontier, there would be nowhere for America to send its malcontents. We as a nation have always had a frontier, and if anyone was dissatisfied with the status quo of the established colonies or states or country, then they went to the West. People went west. And if we run out of west, then all of those people are going to be bottled up in the society, and we have to start to worry about how they're going to act. Are they going to get upset? Are they going to be worried? we're worried about that. And so we're concerned with finding more frontier. That could be Asia, that could be Latin America, who knows? Frontier it is. The big event for us in imperialism then is the Spanish-American War. In 1898, we fought what Teddy Roosevelt called a splendid little war against the Spanish. Ha! Splendid little war. Okay? Why did we fight that war? Number one, the Cubans and the people living in Puerto Rico were living in abject conditions that were forced upon them by their imperial overlords, the Spanish. We as Americans felt that happening only hundreds of miles off the coast of the United States was an offense to our freedoms and our liberties and our way of seeing the world. We wanted to fix it. If you want to go with greedier motives, we were also interested in the sugar industries. Both of those islands, Puerto Rico and Cuba, produce huge amounts of sugar, and if we're not going to get it from Hawaii, which it's looking like we might not at this point, that would be a great place to get it. Also on top of this, we have to consider that America is being stoked up. The jingoism, or white-hot nationalism of America, is being stoked up by the yellow journalism of William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, both of whom are more interested in selling papers than they are really in telling a 100% truthful story. In the long run, both men are going to use the truth and stretch it just a wee bit, or even more, in order to encourage Americans to get involved. In 1898, the USS Maine was blown up in the Havana harbor. Americans believed that it was an attack upon the lives of innocent American soldiers who were there on a peacekeeping humanitarian mission, and it was time to act. Hence the rallying cry of the War of 1898, the Spanish-American War, remember the Maine, to hell with Spain. That's the way we did it. You need a Hulk fist to say that right. Okay. What territory did we take? We took Cuba. We allowed the Cubans to have their own government. We'll come back to that point in a moment. We took Puerto Rico. We took Guam. We paid the Spanish $20 million for the Philippines. The most controversial piece of this is that we allowed the Cubans to have their own government. Now, albeit a government where we're going to be looking over their shoulder a lot. But we didn't allow the Filipinos to have their own government. And in doing so, we really set this standard that if you seem to be a Western Hemisphere power, we'll give you the right to self-rule. But if you're an Eastern Hemisphere, that is to say, if you're from the Orient, we're not willing to give you that power. And therefore, we're going to watch over the Philippines even more closely. First governor of the Philippines, William Howard Taft, working his way up the ladder. He'll be here soon. Okay. The Rough Riders are the regiment that Teddy Roosevelt is involved with. I thought this would go all the way through the Progressives, but honestly, it's like 13 minutes. I think I'm going to do another video that's just the Progressives, and then we'll move on to the Presidents. Hope you're having a good night, ladies and gentlemen. Take care of yourselves.